Welcome to Coffee Hour, the beginning of a week. Hi, my name is Paul Abernathy. Thanks for joining me today here on Coffee Hour. We are glad to have you here. We hope everybody had an amazing weekend, got what you need to get done. Put that aside. It's time to get into the week and start making that money. And just want to welcome everybody for joining me today. Taking the time out of your day to actually join me. I appreciate it. Now, before we get started, as always, coffee hour, cut my head off. Want to remind you, all you got to do is do hashtag win to get it on to spin. We're getting close to the drawing. It's less than 30 days now before the drawing. So we want to make sure you do that. And I look like I am a little drawn out here. Hold on for a second, folks. Let me do something here. I look a little bit peaked. Heck is going on here? Okay, sorry about that. All right, so thanks for joining. As always, folks, I thank you for joining me. Do me a favor. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what's going on in your life. Let me know if you're preparing for an exam. Let me know if you're a student of ours, if you've been through our program. Any of that type of stuff, do me a favor in the chat. And we love having you here. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be talking voltage drop. Obviously, we're not going to cover every aspect of voltage drop, but we'll cover as much of it as we can. And we'll even take a quick peek at the hog. There has been a little change to the hog, so we want to peek at it. But not a change that's not impacting anybody. It's actually, we introduced a lower priced program for those that might not be heavy users. It doesn't give you all the bells and whistles, but it does give you a little more access than the free version. Okay? So anyway, we'll check that out today as well. But again, let's do some shout outs this morning. That's what we always like to do. Give some shout outs to folks that are here. Adam, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Got our coffee. We're ready to go. 5 a.m. this morning. Getting at it early. There you go. And Adam is setting the tone for everybody. Hashtag win to get in on the spin. So thank you, Adam, for setting that up for everybody. Oh, today's show is sponsored. I keep forgetting to do this. Today's show is sponsored by Trade Hog. Okay, so make sure I do that. Sometimes I forget. Good morning, Cray from Nashville. Thanks. Paul. Thanks for joining us, Paul, down in Houston. Glad to have you here. Also, both of those gentlemen getting in on the win. And again, Adam's definitely got that pint of coffee in hand. I don't necessarily have a pint, but it's no little cup by any means. Okay. Haas, good morning. Thanks for coming in. Robert down in San Antonio. Thanks for joining us. Got our Texas group in here, most definitely. Angel is in the house. Thanks for joining me, Angel. I see you, Van Man. I see you, Charles. Hope everything's going good, family. Terrence from up there in D.C., in Maryland, and Virginia. Thanks for joining me. Let's see here. Rob's got the hashtag win. I see you. Zeker. And good morning. Glad to have you here. I'm bad with names, so if I don't remember your actual name, I just use your screen name. Nepo, thanks for joining. Good morning. David, thanks for joining, David. All right, we got all the regulars are in the house. Angel, I am feeling a little bit off today. Not sure why. Probably the medication. Not sure, but not feeling 100%, but it is what it is. We'll get through it. Electricians, we do what we do, right? Let's see. Good morning, outdoors. Alex, good morning. Let's see here. Tyler, good morning from Kaufman, Texas. There you go. Is Van Man. There you go, Van. Tying down today. Code book on the go. There you go. On that lift, man, is still working. You might as well just go on and take a tent. Just take a tent and stay up there. What's up, Andres from New Jersey? Thank you for joining us. Wow, we got a lot of people in here early into the day. Edgar, thanks for joining me, Edgar. What's up, Frank? Happy Monday. You got the little snooze thing in there. Yawn, yawn, yawn. Yeah, we got to get going. Derek from Chicago, thanks for joining me. Love it. Great day. Gracefield, absolutely. From New Brunswick, Texas. Manny, Manny, my Facebook guy, he's in the house. Manny, we got to get that sweatshirt changed, dude. We just got to upgrade. Got to upgrade. Licensed by the city of Chicago. There you go, Derek. Well, all right, guys. Just let me know. Keep pounding them in there. Let me know where you're from, who you are. What do you want to talk about? Different topics, different things in the electrical news. But first things first, before we get into voltage drop, I do want to talk real quickly about TradeHawk in a change that we made. What's up, Tino? I see you in there. Tino's in the house. I want to tell you what change we made. It's just a change in a price structure for those, that type of thing. I see you, Dan Martins. I see you in there, my friend. Thanks for joining me. I just want to show it only because there's some people that have asked about it. So this is TradeHawk again, and it is, I think, the best tool for use in the field. And it also has the Office Hog, which is the back end. But what we did was we did add, just go show you, we did add another plan, which is the Light Hog. This is for people that want to dip their toe in. This only gives you 10 searches or 10 inquiry chains per hour. It's limited. It doesn't have access to Office Hog, which is your back end one. It's tuned in to give you advice on things like HR and all those other contracts and stuff like that. It doesn't do that. And it doesn't include the mobile app, which comes with the premium, all that kind of stuff. So it is limited, but it may be all you need. So some people wanted a lighter version. The best, I recommend the best one is the basic. Unless you want the mobile app, then the premium's the best. And the premium will soon have additional discounts for other things. So we'll have extensive discount programs in there that'll make it pretty much pay for itself. David Subi, I see you over there on Instagram. Thanks for joining me from New Jersey. Glad to see you. Just wanted to acknowledge you. I do see you over there on the Instagram. Okay, so anyway, so that's just a new plan. Obviously, the basic is the middle of the road is one that most people will choose. The premium just gets you a few more bells and whistles. That is all that you get with that. So just wanted to give a shout out to that so that you could kind of see that we are listening to people. They want something basic and they don't need more than 10 inquiry chains. And we talk about inquiry change. That means when you ask a question and you have a follow-up question and a follow-up question and a follow-up question, that all counts in your hour. So you could have one session and do 10 follow-ups and be done for the hour. So that's the restriction on that type of thing. Whereas the other plans have a little less restriction, that type of thing. But it might be all you need. And so if it is, there you go. Okay. Let's see here. What do we got? Adams was out this weekend, and the trade hog on Saturday was putting out the word on the hog. People really like it. Then Sunday had a code hoodie on. I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you for promoting us. We appreciate it most certainly. Let's see. Bueno, Dave says, can I give a shout out to Steve, City Tech in Brooklyn, New York? Yes, I can certainly do that. I most certainly can give a shout out. Shout out to Steve, City Tech in Brooklyn. What's up? Shout out to you. All right. Thank you, Manny. I appreciate it. Then you have to get a new picture. Okay? And you have to do everything in the picture that you did before. All right, brothers. All right. So look, let's get into voltage drop. And talk a little bit about voltage drop, the impact of voltage drop, where I think voltage drop will be going, which I do think it will be. The rumble in our industry is that is where something will be going. And so let's go on and get over to the lesson real quick. All right, so here we are. As you see, as requested, down on the bottom, right over there, you do see your chat, so you can ask your questions as we go. I acknowledge beforehand that the slide will be hard to see for some people. This is very busy. This is why I didn't want to originally put all this stuff and just wanted to have it full screen, but everybody wanted to be able to see the chat and everything, so we'll give it a shot, but in the future, I may just go back to full screen. Because I do acknowledge that you'd be watching it on a small phone and some of this stuff may be hard to see. I acknowledge it already. I also acknowledge that it's white text on an orangish, reddish background is probably tough to see. Just listen to my words and you'll get it. But it's the best we got right now because I didn't want to go through and change any slides. Okay, so just saying. All right, so let's go on and get into it. Let's talk a little bit about voltage drop. First of all, I guess we should discuss what the impacts voltage drop, but what can cause voltage drop. Okay, and voltage drop comes from running circuits long distances and not taking into account the resistance and the impedance of that circuit that can cause the voltage, which is pressure, to drop. Okay. Now we know when we lose pressure, it can make us, hell, that might be my problem. Maybe I got low blood pressure. I don't know. It can cause problems. Same thing in a circuit. If you run it a long distance and you drop that voltage from what is provided to you from the utility, and there's going to be an expected level of drop, but you start to really drop it down, then what happens is it can degrade the effects onto the system. Okay, so like we see here, the first one, low voltage, can cause, we'll see some other causes, but these are what can cause it. Long runs, conductors that are too small. What's up, John? Thanks for joining us down in Orlando. Running circuits a long way and not taking into consideration the length and the conductor size. Poor terminations, poor connections at terminations can cause a voltage drop condition. Conductors operating in high temperatures, having a high resistance. You don't think about it. You're running in an area with a really high elevate or has a high resistance, or there's something that changes the situation, like a very high ambient. Temperatures can also play an effect on voltage drop. So we don't think about that as much, but all those things can have different things that cause problems with the voltage drop. Now, in a residential situation, voltage drop doesn't manifest itself nearly as much unless you're doing really, really large houses. Or if you don't do your planning very well. In a house that I recently did in Oklahoma, I didn't wire it. I did a review on as the expert witness for a case. Very long home runs, right? Very long. I'm not exaggerating. This house was probably 12,000, 13, maybe even 14,000 square feet, maybe even more. Right? What's up, Rob? Thanks for joining us. So it was very long runs. And rather than centrally locate a remote distribution panel somewhere, right? Rather than do that, what they did was just ran all these long home runs, even 14 gauge, all the way back to the panel that was in the garage, a 6-car, 7-car, 8-car garage, whatever it was, ran them all the way out. And they started having problems with AFCIs, started having problems with other things. And I wasn't hired to do that beyond the original, initial part of whether AFCIs were required, because they were removing AFCIs because the AFCIs wouldn't hold. They had to put regular breakers in there. And so beyond that, I suspect that there was an issue of voltage drop. Now, for me, I didn't get to play around in it enough. I would love to have been able to do that. They end up settling the case after my deposition. But when they knew they really couldn't win, so it was better off for somebody to just agree to disagree and get this resolved. But at the end of the day, I would have loved to push the manufacturers to the edge. I would have liked to have said, well, how come this circuit doesn't have any issues, but when you put it on an AFCI, now it has an issue? The only variable in here is the length. And then they were going to open everything up. I would have loved to examine it and then try to determine that it was the length. But I don't think that would get any resolved because the manufacturers of the AFCIs have really never said anything. They don't really want to touch it, I don't think. So calling you out, AFCI manufacturers, okay? Love to have you on the show. Okay, Dimitrovich, you want to come on the show? I'd love to have you on it. All right, okay. But I'm going to grill you because I want to know. I'm just saying. So, but voltage drop can be a player, and that's why it's going to be rearing its head. I believe it should be rearing its head. Whether it'll get anywhere, I don't know, but it will rear its head in the 2029 edition of the NEC. Okay, so and it will be more talk about it, and we're going to talk about a little more today about that type of thing. All right, all those things can cause issues. Now, what are the effects? And I get it, this is going to be hard to see, so just listen as we talk about what are the effects of voltage drop. The effects of voltage drop on a circuit: reduced performance. Electrical devices may not receive enough voltage to operate properly. A lot of equipment operate in a window of voltage, right? And so they operate in that window, and when the voltage falls outside of that window, the equipment will be asked to operate outside of its scope of voltage range. Now, remember, one of the things that I think is so critical for people to understand is that when you're doing voltage drop, and you'll see us when we do some examples here, is that the length is important, the load on the end is important, right? And we always size the circuit based on our load first. We get that out of the way. We know we got a 30 amp load. We size the conductors for 30 amps. We size the overcurrent for 30. We do everything that we're supposed to do for voltage drop, right? I mean, for circuit sizing, we do what we got to do. When we think of voltage drop, which is not a requirement, by the way, it's a recommendation of the NEC, except for fire pumps in sensitive electronic equipment. So we won't go to the NEC to show you, okay, in 210.19 and 215.2. We won't go in and show you the informational note about 3% for the branch, 5% overall, because that should by now be a given. And I don't want to taint our understanding of why we're doing voltage drop by saying, well, it's not code requirement, it's informational note, right? I get it. What we're trying to do is understand the effects of voltage drop and why we should take voltage drop into consideration, whether the code says to or not, that type of thing. Because I'm going to tell you why, because I hear so many people telling me, well, code is minimum. Okay, well, if you're going to talk out of that side of your mouth and say code is minimum, I always go above code. Well, here's your opportunity, because voltage drop would be something that goes above the minimum standard. Okay? All right, so in this case, when we talk about reduced performance, also, here's something you have to think about. If I have a 100-watt load, okay, I'm just going to show you just the basics. And this is what people don't take in consideration, because they think about voltage drop, but they don't think about the relationship that voltage drop has on the ampacity of a circuit. If I have, and I'm just doing Ohm's law, okay, I'm not doing distance, and that can affect it. We're just saying after the effects of voltage drop. If I have a 100-watt load, okay, and I take that 100 watts and I divide it into 120, that's 0.833, not even 1 amp, okay? I'm just throwing numbers here, right? Now, if I take that same 100 watts and the voltage is dropped to 90, I'm just throwing numbers here, 90 at the end of a long run, then I divide that 100 into 90, now it's 1.1. The amps go up. So as your voltage drop increases, it's proportionally amplified over on the ampacity of the circuit. This can be critical when you're sizing things right to the edge, right? And you size a circuit for a certain ampacity and the load, which you've expected, and now voltage drop, if it's a long way, maybe it's going out to a pump in a well, or maybe it's going to something. And now what happens is you're going to have an ampacity that's going to also change. So it's not just the voltage, but the ampacity will change relative to the voltage, okay? So that's some things that people really don't think about. And so it can impact your conductor sizing. It may be minute for certain runs, but I mean, it is still something. If you're going to be in the realm of thinking about voltage drop, it is something that you need to consider, okay? Dimming lights. When you have a circuit that is very long, and even in a dwelling, we can have not just the home run, but the way you loop your circuits, depending on how you situate your loads at the end and how you're loading. If you end up dumping your most excessive loads or things that can be plugged in at the end of a circuit, right? It may not be impactful because you know what? In residential, we can put lights and receptacles on the same circuit for general use, right? So if you think about how your circuit's laid out and you run through everything, and then at the end of your circuit, you're putting in, somebody may plug in a load that is at the end of an excessively long run, then what happens is when that thing pulls that load, it could cause the lights to dim, could cause them to flicker, depending on things. So that could be what you get those service calls out there where people wonder what the hell is going on. It could be the excessive run of that circuit. There are people that will do, will realize that they can put, that the code doesn't tell you how many receptacles or how many lights except for the wattage limit that's going to limit you. on a circuit. There's nothing in the NEC for residential that limits you. Okay, so we have some golden rules that we follow. We try to remember that 180 VAs for commercial, but we remember to we use that in our mentality for when we're doing how many receptacles or loads we can put in a residential, but the code doesn't tell us. So in really big homes where you have things that'll flicker down or whatever, it could be from voltage drop. The other issue could be overheating of wires. Excessive voltage drop increases the current draw, as we just saw in the example. Okay, and depending on what that load is, I know a situation where there was a motor for a hydro massage bathtub that was excessively long, and they sized the circuit, and what happens when that motor would come on? Okay, it was so long that the voltage dropped down, and it seemed like they were constantly replacing that hydro massage bathtub's pump motor. Was it a coincidence? I don't know, but it was excessive voltage drop for a long period of time. So it can play havoc on equipment. So that took us to the motor failure. Motors run inefficiently. They can overheat. They do have overloads. They could be clicking out. Okay, that type of thing. So this is why voltage drop, people say for motors, does that create a hazard? Well, no, because typically the motor is going to have an overload, but the inconvenience is no different than people argue that the breakers trip or that the GFCI's trip is an inconvenience. Okay, that type of thing. Same thing. If a motor continually fails or cuts out, it's an inconvenience for the owner. It's a pain. There's a chance they might do something they're not supposed to do to circumvent it or hire somebody to come in and do something. So all these type of things, voltage drop can be something to take into consideration. Voltage sensitive equipment damage. Electronic devices and sensitive equipment may malfunction or become damaged due to under voltage conditions for long-term situations. You could have equipment that, again, because of voltage drop, it's operating outside of the scope of the voltage range for that piece of equipment. And if you look at some equipment, it does have a voltage range that it operates in. Computers, for example, have a voltage range that it likes to operate in. So again, these are just things to take into consideration. Maybe less impactful in a residential, but it is certainly something that you have to take into consideration. I believe you do for a efficient installation. Okay, so inefficiency increases voltage drop means wasted energy, leading to higher operational costs. With that said, there is a requirement in the International Energy Conservation Code for commercial buildings. All right, and here it is right here, and this is the latest edition. Okay, the 2024 is, so we're here. And if you go down, you can see, let's see here, let's get down to, let's see here. Seems like it disappeared on me, but I had it a little while ago, so we'll find it. Bear with me. We'll find it. Hold on here. So we're in the Energy Conservation Code, not the residential code, Energy Conservation Code. Okay. Gotta go back a little bit. I went too far. Way too far, folks. Hold on. Great day. I'm in the wrong freaking. There we go. Okay. Right here. Voltage drop. Okay. Right here. Say the total voltage drop across the combination of the customer-owned service conductors. Again, customer-owned service conductors. Can't do anything about the utility, but if the point of attachment stops at a pad mount transformer, and now those service conductors are the ownership of the customer. Again, you got to know where the point of attachment is. You got to know where the a line of demarcation begins from when it's utility owned to when it becomes customer owned. So you have to know that. But if it's customer owned service conductors, feeder conductors, or branch circuit conductors, this shall not exceed 5% overall. Now, how many people are doing this in the commercial side, whether or not they're enforcing it, whether or not it's being mandated, I don't know. I can't control. I can't tell you anything different. But you see that it is in the commercial side, not in the residential energy code, but it is in the commercial side. Okay. So it's a mandate there, whether or not somebody's pushing it or not, it's there. And is it going to rear its head? Well, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. So if it's good for commercial and there's reasons for it, and this is energy code, then it stands a reason it's going to weed its way into the residential energy code if you can make enough cases for why voltage drop is an issue. Okay. All right. Enough of that said. So, question, okay, do we have formulas to calculate voltage drop? Absolutely. Do you need to memorize them? Absolutely not. You write them down in your code book, jot them down. If you're taking an exam, if you're in a state that allows you to write them down. On an exam, you may get one question, maybe two. It's not going to make or break your world. In the real world, you're going to use calculators. So you're probably not going to have as big of an issue with this if you use calculator, but we need to show the formulas and we need to talk about it a little bit. So there are simple formulas to calculate voltage drop on a single phase. And a single phase, it considers only DC resistance on the conductors and the temperature of the conductor. I should also remind you that voltage drop, the table gives us a value for voltage drop, and it gives you value DC. This can change, okay? It can change with the temperature when you're doing the calculation of what the ambient temperature is at the location of where you're doing it. But for most purposes, you're going to be able to get away, especially if your exam, you're going to be able to get away with just dealing with the Chapter 9, Table 8 values for the ohmeric values and work from there. Okay, for the most case, you're going to be able to get away from that or use that. So let me make sure I do have a link up real quick because I want to, if we need to pull to that real quick. Hold on here. I did not have it up, so let me make sure I have it up. Okay, all right, I do. All right, so let's go on. All right. So it says the more accurate formula considers AC resistance and has reactance, temperature, and spacing in a metal conduit. And again, you're going to be using values that are in Chapter 9, Table 9 for those type of scenarios. Okay. All right. Let's see. Cray says we haven't even gotten into the formulas yet. We got questions. So with voltage drop, where do you start? What is the service voltage starts at with no load? Well, you have to do a load calculation, right? So you have to assume when you do a voltage drop, you have to do a load calc. And before you can even size your service, you're going to know what your load is. Otherwise, you're not sizing a service. So you have to do a load calculation. So you're going to have some value to plug in on what your load is. A lot of times people will take it and say, well, at the service, if it's owned, in other words, it's not utility. Again, get that out of your mind. I can't control the utility. So it has to be customer owned. So from wherever the point of attachment is, if those are service conductors coming in that point, many people will go either do a load calculation and base it on that first value, or they'll turn around and go, well, I'm going to base it on the value of the whatever the breaker is. If it's 200 amp service, they'll base the service part on a 200 amp so that it could pull its maximum load. Okay, so they may start at that value. That type of scenario, okay? We're going to look at some examples that do pieces, okay? But that's the principle. You may have to you might just use the service load. A lot of times with voltage drop, for example, when we're doing branch circuits and feeder stuff, we don't know the loads except for the load that's going to be plugged into it. They may say, well, it's a 30 amp breaker. I'm like, oh, what's the exact load of the motor at the end? They go, I don't know. They told me for this piece of equipment, it's 30 amp breaker. Okay. So all we know is it's 30 amps. So we're going to have to use the maximum value. Okay. So the more detail you know, the more you can plug in, right? But you have to know a value. So if it's a 30 amp breaker on whatever the load is, then we need to know what the load is at the end. If we don't know what the load is at the end, we're going to go with the maximum load that could be at the end. Okay, which is a 30 amp because we have a 30 amp overcurrent device, that type of scenario. I mean, that's that one scenario that we may use. That's why it's so important to know the load, because that breaker may be short circuit ground fault protection sized, right? And the load at the end is an FLC for a motor. And so that's why it's important for you to know what the motor is. So again, when it comes to voltage drop, we have to know some values. The only thing that we can guess at is if the service is 200 amps and we're doing service conductors, then we just say, screw it, we'll do 200 amps because that's the maximum it can draw. A lot of people say, wait a minute, it can't draw but 80%. That is not true. It can draw 200%, as long as it's not continuous for 3 hours or more. So generally, that's not what's going to happen. So again, I can pull up to 200 amps on a 200 amp breaker, not a problem. Okay. So at the end of the day, that's how we generally would start it. But we have some examples, Craig, we'll look at. Let's see. So which chapter 9, table 8 or table 9 is more accurate? A simple voltage drop formula is more accurate with these smaller conductors and gets increasingly less accurate as the conductors increase in size. That is absolutely true. You're not going to see much difference at all if you use values from chapter 9, table 8 versus chapter 9, table 9 until you start getting in larger conductors. Okay, so typically voltage drop for residential applications, you can get away with just using the chapter 9, table 8 values, the DC values. Typically for those applications, you can get away with it. All right, so looking at some basic formulas to just kind of very basic, okay, to find out the exact voltage dropped. All right, it depends on what you're using, what educators material you're using. It may be listed as ED or VD, okay, but this is the actual voltages dropped. This is the amount that is dropped, okay. The E being a symbol many places for voltage, D being the amount dropped, not percentage, but amount dropped. Okay, so K being a constant, I being the current, L being the length one way, and 2 being the multiplier because it is single phase. Okay. 3-phase, same concept. The only difference, you're substituting 2 with a 1.732 because it is 3-phase. And then circular mill area is the actual area of the conductor. You get that from chapter 9, table 8. You can find the circular mill area of a conductor. Okay. So these are formulas, screenshot, write down, jot down, again, that type of thing. Okay. Now let's explain the formula. Okay. So VD or ED in this formula is the actual volts drops. Don't get into this thing that people do is they'll actually use 3%. No, you need to find the actual volts drops. So, and to do that, if I got 120, then I do 120 times 3%, and that's 3.6. So 3% for a 120 is 3.6 volts drops. That's be 3% drop. Do the same thing depending on whatever voltage you have. Okay, whatever the voltage is times 3%. That's going to give you your value. All right. Now, and that's what we want to use in these equations. We do not want to actually use 3% or 5%, the value 5%. We want to get the volts, okay, that have been dropped. Next is K. K is that constant. It assumes specific resistance. It's pretty close through the spectrum. That is why it's become very common to not have to know how to calculate the exact K. We'll show you how to do that, but at the end of the day, if you just remember 12.9 for copper and 21.2 for aluminum, when it comes to the K, then you're going to be okay. And the temperatures obviously can vary this because, at the end of the day, the temperatures can play an effect on it. The cooler it is, seems to be less resistance. The hotter it is, more resistance. But at the end of the day, for smaller circuits and everything, it's not going to play as much of a big factor for you to worry about. The L is the length, again, one way. I is the load in amps. What is your desired load at the end? There's a gentleman's probably watching that did a video that was explaining that you don't have voltage drop if you don't have a load. That's true, but we have to always know the load to do an adequate voltage drop. So anything other than that is semantics in the sense that in order to have a voltage drop, we have to have some type of load. We have to know what the load is on the end. And if the worst case scenario is for a circuit, again, if we do not know the load, then we go with the maximum load that circuit could hold. And then we use that. If we do know a load, like a light at the end of a driveway or a motor at the end of a well, then we should know the load. Right? We should know whether the wattage or what the horsepower is, that we can go to 430.248 and we can find out what the FLC is. and we could do all that type of stuff. And then we size our conductors as we normally would, 430.22 if it's a motor, 125% of the FLC. We do everything we normally do, and we size the circuit as we normally would. Then, only then, since we do know the load, we do know the distance, we know the K, right? We have all the variables, only then can we start to calculate out what the voltage drop will be. And we have various formulas that we can use for that type of thing. Circular mil can be referenced in CM, CMA. Either way, that is the circular mils. You get that value. Now, some of them you won't need to go to the table. Once you get above 4 aught, then you obviously know that 250 kc mils is 250,000 circular mil. You get it. You understand it. But when you're at 4 aught and less, unless you just know 211,600, I believe, or whatever, unless you already know that, then you're just going to have to go to Chapter 9, Table 8. And you probably have a tab in your code book for that. And then don't forget that 1.732 replaces the 2 when you're doing these formulas with 3-phase. That simple. All right, now, how do we produce that K, by the way? All right, so multiply the resistance value per foot converted from 1,000-foot value, which is what's given in Chapter 9, Table 8. It's given per 1,000 feet. So that's the number that you see. So the easiest thing to remember is you need to break that down into per foot, right? So you're going to take whatever that value you have there, and you need to convert it into footage. Find out what it is per foot based on what situation that you're dealing with, okay? So in this case, we'll find the K for a 10 solid copper. First step, Chapter 9, Table 8. I know this is hard to see, folks. Bear with me, just listen. Chapter 9, Table 8, I locate the circular mils of a 10 AWG. Okay, so we go over to the code. Here we are. Let's share this tab instead. So here we're at. And we find the circular mil for a 10 right here. Let's see here. Pop this up. And we go down here, right here. So there's our 10,380. Okay, so we've got that value already. Okay. All right, so we got that. All right, okay, so we've got this one here, 10,380. Got it. Next, number 2, we need to locate the DC resistance for the 10 AWG at 1,000 feet. Okay, so we'll go back to the code. All right, we're still in the same area, and we're in the 10, so I'll go in and highlight 10. And we said solid, so we'll just go with the solid right here, all the way over. Okay. All right, so uncoated, okay, that's normal copper. We're not doing insulation here. Okay, we're using a direct current. And remember, this is based on 75 degrees C. Okay. And so in our case right here, we're just working off the basics here, uncoated, and that is right there, 1.21. All right. All right, so that's where we get this value right here. All right, so break it down. We have the 1.21 divided into 1,000. It's going to give us 0.00121 ohms per foot. So now we know what it is per foot. Then we just take that and we multiply that into the circular mil, which is 10,380. And that gives us 12.55 or 12.6. And that is the K. All right, so that is a more accurate K. In the scheme of life, it's probably not going to change anything significant, but that is how we get up with the A. So the industry has pretty much told us that we can just use 12.9 for copper and 21.2 for aluminum. Okay, what's up, Trey? Thanks for joining. Beto, I see you in here. I don't want to miss anybody. All right, so there you go. So that's how you calculate out the exact K. But we don't really need to do the exact K. Now, can this number vary a little bit? Yeah, this number can vary a little bit because if you come down here, I'll show you. Let me go back to the code real quick. If you come down here, you can see that you have an equation for the temperature change. Okay? You have a little equation. And we have this equation actually built in to our conductor sizing cards that we have over on available for sale over whether it's a wire length for the reel. We do the equation for you if you need to change the temperature. Okay. So you always work out the parentheses and work it out. So again, temperature 2 would be the temperature that you're actually at versus the standard, which is 75, which is the base of the table. Okay, work that first, that type of thing. All right, and of course, in your A's in here are these values here, depending on what you're dealing with. Okay, and you just work it out. Okay, we're not going to get into the equation because for an exam, you're only going to need to use the values that are given you from the table. Okay, and they're not going to make a difference in your overall calculation. Maybe in an upcoming video, we'll get into deeper, but I don't want to confuse people for that because typically it's unnecessary, especially for anything that's typically 500 kc mil and less. It's typically not going to make a difference. All right, so this is going to be one that is hard to see. I get it. I understand that it's hard to see, and I can't do anything about it, okay? Unless I go back to full screen, and we might do that on the next, so don't nobody say I can't see it. I already get you can't see it. Don't need to remind me you can't see it. It's just, is what it is. All right, so here we have different values dealing. So again, this equation right here, which is VD equals, okay, equals, and this is the traditional one, A, okay, single phase, that's the 2. So 2 times K times L times I, y'all know the values, circular mill, that assumes we already know the conductor that we want to use, right? That assumes we already know the conductor that we're using. Like somebody says, hey, dude, I ran you a 6, you'll hear the well guy runs you a wire and runs it up because he pulled it down in the well and says, hey, man, I gave you a 6. Well, your job is to say, well, crap, is that going to work? Is that going to be efficient for that motor now? You've already given me a conductor size. So I can go look up the circular mill and plug it in right here and tell me what my voltage dropped, the actual volts that will have dropped that distance, okay? So that's there, okay? The next would be right here is C. Let's see the formula to finding the voltage drop on a single phase, this method. So this uses resistance, okay? So this one right here uses the resistance, and you get this resistance like we did for 1 foot of conductor, just like we just recently did. Take the 1,000 foot to break it down, but you know, put it right here, the resistance. And that's going to equate for the length. That's going to have the current. So you can do it that way if you want. 2 times the resistance from chapter 9, table 8, times L, the length one way, times I, which is the current. You have to know the load at the end, all right? And so that can be another formula you may use. But this one's going to require you to go to the code book and get those values, right? And this one does not use the K, right? So that might be an easier one for some folks to remember. Now, if you want to know the maximum length that a conductor can run and stay within the voltage drop parameters, remember using the actual volts dropped, not putting 3% in there, not putting 5% in there. Don't do it. Actual volts dropped, then you can take the circular mill of the conductor, which you got from chapter 9, table 8. The circular mill, in this case, let's say it was 250 kc mil. It says 250,000 goes right here. Times whatever the voltage drop is for the voltage. So whatever it is, if it's 240 volts, it'd be 7.2 of the actual volts drops because you go 240 times 3%. And that is 7.2. There it is on Mr. Casio. Okay, so that would be 7.2 right here if it was a 240 volt circuit. Then it'd be 2 times K, the constant, copper, 12.9, aluminum, 21.2, times I, whatever the load is at the end, and that's going to tell you the maximum length that you can have and not exceed 3% voltage drop. If I wanted it to be 5%, because it was an overall feeder, right, then I could put the 5% value voltage drop in here, and it's going to tell me the length. And you're going to see some examples in a minute. We're going to do some things. All right. So another one using the resistance formula right here. I put the voltage drop value on top, whatever that volts are, the actual volts, and divide that by 2 times the resistance. You already know how we went and found that. For 1 foot of conductor, you saw how we calculated that. Times I, which is the current at the end of the run. Okay. And that's going to tell us what the maximum length that we could run before we hit our voltage drop. Now, you could screenshot this, swipe it to the side, blow it up, whatever you want to do. I think we have an article on this over on our blog about voltage drop. If not, one will be written. I'll go look, and if I don't have one already, I will write one. You can go refer to that article if you want. But we cover voltage drop in our program as well, so you should have a good understanding of voltage drop. All right. So this one over here says, well, what if I don't know the conductor size I need? Okay. Well, and again, remember with all these formulas, when it's three-phase, you do what? You just replace the 2 with a 1.732, right? Okay, so this case, we're single phase, so 2 times K times L times I divided by the actual volts dropped, okay? And that's going to give you the circular mill, okay? That type of scenario. Same thing here. If we want to know what the resistance is over that span, then we have the actual volts dropped, and we can go 2 times the length times the current, and it'll give us the resistance. This is G, which is the formula, okay? The formula applies Ohm's law to find the conductor size, right? The result, the minimum conductor, it gives us the resistance. Now we have H. Now this one tells us the current, expected current, because it's all relative, right? So this one, we have the circular mill. We have multiply that by the volts dropped, okay? Oh yeah, Adam's correct. Adam, I'm glad you pointed that out, Adam, because I didn't think I forgot about that. Over on Fast Tracks Tube, we do have a video where I did voltage drop. Thank you, Adam. Adam is what we call our ultimate supporter. He's get the swag. He promotes the programs. He watches the videos. I'm sure all of you are that ultimate supporter. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. I appreciate you. But thank you, Adam, for pointing that out. So here you go. That's a formula you could use. And then here's another one. So this one just uses the K, and this one will use the resistance value. And we saw how you get the resistance value per foot. That's going to be important information to know. Okay. Now, again, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, substitute the 2 for 1.732 if it's a three-phase equation. Okay. All right. So again, this is no different. I know it's hard to see, but these are exactly the same. The only difference, I know it's hard to see, but the only difference in these equations, okay, than these equations is that we substituted 1.732. That's the only difference. And the reason this is so small is when I used to do this in a classroom, it was easier to see. And so I could get them all on here and it didn't have to be really big. But anyway, and here's our call outs. The next question that people ask, Paul, are these slides available? They are not. Sorry, got to answer that question. They are not. But we will try to put all this stuff in an article soon if you need it. But again, like I said, you can go watch my video on Fast Tracks too. All right, let's do some practical examples. Okay, at the end of the day, we need some examples. All right, so we have a recommendation, which is typically what you see if they want you to do a calculation in an exam for voltage drop. Typically what you'll see is they'll say, do not exceed the NEC recommendations. Okay, so the NEC will tell us that is a 3% for the branch and a 5% overall, okay, as a recommendation. Okay, so it says do not exceed the recommendation. So let's see if we can do some here. So I have at 75 degrees C, what size conductors are required to supply a 2 horsepower, 230 volt, single phase motor that is 150 feet from the source? Okay, so again, we have all the factors that we want to do. So we know that it's what? All right, does it say this the type of conductor? No. So what do we always know from code? What do we always assume when we don't have the conductor type? What do we always assume? Waiting for everybody to tell. What do we always assume of conductor type when I know there's a delay. So when it doesn't tell us in a question, we always assume copper. We never assume aluminum. In the real world, it's whatever you got. but we always assume copper unless stated otherwise, okay? That's a golden rule when it comes to exams or doing anything like that. We always assume copper unless stated otherwise. Okay, so we've got, now we don't assume temperature, we assume copper. All right, so at 75 degrees C, what size conductors are required? Okay, so we know the horsepower. We're gonna have to go and find out what the FLC is for this motor. Okay, we do know the voltage and a single phase motor. Okay, so we know single phase. So we're doing a single phase voltage drop calculation. We do know the length, right? Okay, but we're gonna have to find all the variables. So if we use the formula, whoops, I don't want to give it all away yet. Then we have to go get some information. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the NEC first, and I'm going to go there. And it's a 2 horsepower motor, so I need to go down to 430. First thing I need to do, I always get out of the way, is get your motors out of the way, find out what the amps are for this motor. And it's single phase, so we know we're going to 248. So I'm here. I'll expand it. And 230, we're at this column here. So we'll go down, and it's a 2 horsepower, so we're right here. So it looks like it's a 12. So it looks to me like under single phase, 230, 2 horsepower, it's 12 amps. So 12 amps is our load for this one. Okay, so that's 12 amp is our load. All right, so we have copper. We're going to use 12.9. We have the distance, which is 150 feet. We have the, we know it's single phase, so we're using 2. And we have the amps, which is 12. So we have all the variables to plug in. It's just a matter of which formula do we want. And we know what the voltage drop is. So this is a 230 volt circuit, right? It says 230 volts, so we want to do the voltage drop. So let's drop down here. Okay. All right. All right, so let's see what we're going to do. So here we go. We're trying to find the conductor size right here. All right, so in our example, both the supply and the load side equipment disconnect means are branch circuit conductors. Therefore, the maximum recommended voltage drop is 3%. We went to 430.248, right? To find the full load current in amps. We did that. That's this step right here. I know it's hard to see. Don't have to remind me. Approximate K, we're going to do 12.9 right here, because that is the value that we're going to be using for copper. We're going to use just a flat out K, assumed K. And let's see, 12 amps is a current for the 2 horsepower motor. That's what we got. Okay. So let's look here. So here's the formula we're using because we're trying to find the circular mill. We're trying to find conductor. So we plug it in. 2 times 12.9 times 150 feet times 12. Now, why do we use 6.9 instead of 7.2? Because the question gave us the voltage. And my rule of thumb for everybody is always use the value they give you. Okay? Because in the real world, the voltage can change. It's not always going to be 240. Okay? So if we're doing a calculation, it can actually change. So we're going to always, on an exam, we're going to use the value they give you. In the real world, if you can't find that voltage, or you should have a meter that'll measure you the voltage ahead of time so you can get the accurate voltage. In the scheme of life, if you probably just, in the real world, always used 120s and 240s, you're probably going to be fine. It's going to put you close enough. Again, voltage drop's not a requirement anyway, so it's going to get you close enough. But if you want to be extremely exact, that's why you use all that fancy equipment that you have, that you paid for, okay? You measure the voltage and you work from there in order to be able to calculate it out. But on an exam, they gave us the voltage, and it's 230. All right, so that's what we did. So we did 230 times 3%, and that is how we got 6.9 on the old trusted Casio, okay? So in doing that, 2 times 12.9 times 150 times 12, and then divide that by 6.9, that gives 6,730. That is your circular mills. So then you got to go over to chapter 9, table 8. Okay, so we'll do that. And you'll go over to chapter 9, table 8. I already have it pulled up somewhere, right here. And we'll bring up these properties. So here's chapter 9, table 8. So we have to have a conductor that it's at least 6730. So we'll go down here. And well, this is 12 is 6530. Not going to work for us. It's got to be at least 6730. So we're going to have to go to the next largest size, which is 10,380. And so that here tells us it's a 10 gauge, right? Okay. So we're right here, and we go back to the equation, the lesson, and that's where you can see right here, it's a 10 gauge. Now, for some people say, well, how do I use the alternate method? That one we talked about earlier, finding out if you want to do it this way, you can find the resistance, okay? So R, resistance, you could do this formula if you wanted. I find it more complicated or more steps to do, but you use that voltage drop. There's the formula, same thing, there's the formula. V voltage drop, actual volts goes on top. You still have 2 times 1500 times 12, okay, that's the amps. And that gives you 0.001917, right? Okay. Now, you take this is the actual per foot. Okay. It works it out resistance per foot. Okay, because you gave the number of feet here. You then multiply that by 1,000 to bring it back up to so that we can go use the table. Okay, so that brings it back up to 1.917. Okay. All right, and then we can go back at that point if you choose to go this route. Then we can go back over here. Then we can go back over to the resistances over here. And let's pin the top so we can see. All right, we're at uncoded right here. And it gets down. And I have to have 1.912. So here the resistance is 1.98. That resistance is higher. Right? And if we go to the left, I'll show you what that is, by the way. That's the 12. So we have to have resistance that is going to be lower than that. And that's where we come over here. And the next one down is 1.12. Okay, so we'd have to go down because we want a resistance that's at least 1.917. And this is higher than that. So we have to go down here to get one that's less resistance. So if you want to do it that way, you can. Totally up to you how to do that. I think the other way is easier. But anyway, that's an alternative way for you to come up with the calculation. I think this method here is much easier, but this one gets you familiar with working in the ohms and things like that. Okay. All right, next practical example. It says at 75 degrees C, now that we have selected that 10 for our install, so we did the install, we know it's a 10. What is the maximum length of that 10 conductor run to not exceed the recommended voltage drop recommendations using the same values? So everything stayed the same. It's still the same 12 amp motor. What now I want to know, how far could I run that? I mean, it's okay. It's obviously going to handle our voltage drop for that scenario of 150 feet. But now you're thinking, well, what is the max? Or you may get that question that leads on to it and say, well, what is the maximum I can go? How far could I go with that 10? Now that I jumped it to a 10, how far could I go? All right, well, we do the math. Now we have to pick our formula. So remember the one we had with the L? So we have the circular mill, which we already picked now because of the voltage drop, which is a 10. Our voltage drop stays the same, which is 6.9. That is our 3% of that 230 volt circuit. And then we just plug it in. 2. Again, if this was 3-phase, it'd be 1.732, but it's not. It's single-phase circuit. So we go 2 times K, which is 12.9, times I, which is still the 12 amps. You do that formula, 10,380 times 6.9, divided into 2 times 12.9 times 12. That's going to give you approximately 231.33 feet. So I could run it. We've got the length of 150. We have a little cushion here because I could run it a little longer than that and still be within my recommended 3% voltage drop, right? So again, that's just kind of a way you do it to see what headroom you may have. and that type of thing. Or maybe you say, I want to know what the maximum length is. So one way you might use this is they've already ran the circuit. They already, subcontractor put it in, and you're the electrician come in. This happens all the time. The well people put their line in, and they run it up to the house or to the controller, and you get there as an electrician. You're like, okay, I got to run the circuit over to it. And of course, you didn't even run that wire, right? The plumbers ran it or whoever ran it. And you assume they know what they were doing. You're the electrician, and now you're being asked to hook up to the controller and everything, and you know what you need to run, right? And then all of a sudden, that the conductor they ran is a certain size, and you're like, oh God, they're not an electrician, but they've been doing this a long time, so maybe they do know it. Maybe they did something. Last thing I want is to have a motor down there that I have to keep pulling up because something happens with it. Okay, so you start to do it and say, okay, let me find out what the maximum length that this can be. I know that well is 125 feet down, and they marked that the pump is down 120 feet, and then I've got 150 feet from the pump head itself, from the top of the wellhead to the dwelling, and you start wanting to do the math because they already gave you the wire. That's where this can come in handy to see if you're within that scope. Again, not a code requirement, a recommendation, but it's still very prudent. Okay. Last thing we want is to run the risk of prematurely wearing out a well motor. Okay. I'm just saying. All right. So anyway, y'all guys have to deal with this on a regular basis. Okay. So these are just little things to think about. So that's how we would do the length. That's how we would use that formula. Okay. Now, let's see here. What size conductor is needed if we have a 10 amp load? So I know the load. Whether it's on an exam question or you just know what the load is. And you got to know the load to do voltage drop adequately, or you're going to size it at the maximum potential of whatever could be on that circuit. If you don't know the actual load, then you have to go to whatever the max could be for that circuit because you don't know any different. You just have to, okay? And you have to have a load for voltage drop to even be usable. Okay, so now, people say, well, how do I know that when I'm doing a branch circuit in a house? I'm running these circuits. How do I know? Well, then what you want to do is you want to always assume that the maximum load could be pulled on the furthest receptacle or the furthest device or the furthest motor. You have to know that load, and that's what you're going to equate for. Is it going to pull that much? Probably not. But could it? Could somebody plug it at the end? Absolutely. Can a 15 amp circuit have 15 amps on it? Absolutely it can. Another misconception. People say, no, you can never load it more than 80%. Tell that to the homeowner because they're going to plug in whatever they can plug in. You know what I'm saying? And so if it's not continuous, then I can pull 15 amps on a 15 amp circuit and it's going to be fine. 20 amps on a 20 amp circuit, it's going to be fine. It's only when they're pulling something as a continuous load at its maximum output for 3 hours or more that becomes an issue. But do you think that people take that into consideration? No, not unless they're running to specific appliances or specific equipment where they actually know the load. So that's why this is difficult to do this. It's going to be difficult for people to do this in a scenario of a residential. The only way that I can think that we can conceivably get this in here is to come up with a recommended method, for example, understanding the lengths, okay? So, because you're going to have home runs, you're going to have loops, you're going to have loops between luminaires. And so it's going to be one of those things where, you're going to have to, it's going to be tough. I ain't lying to you. In commercial, it's pretty easy because we know the runs from point A to point B to equipment. It's already laid out. They know the raceways. They know the distances. Tough in residential to do. The good news is, probably not something that you're going to take into consideration for normal layouts. It's probably not because we know you never have. Things run fine. You may get some light fluctuations, flickering in certain things, may or may not be due to voltage drop. I don't think these things probably are going to be taken into consideration for residential until you have really long runs, until you have really significant loads at the end of a long run, like to equipment. Okay, units in the attics or units of big houses where you have motors at the very end of a dedicated individual branch circuit, then you might take those things. But the normal layouts, I don't think it's anything for us to worry about. Okay, even though it may get into the code, I think it's going to be in a way that helps you be able to apply it. Otherwise, this could be a nightmare. I understand. I can respect that it could be a nightmare. Okay. But worst case scenario is if you always assumed the maximum load at the end of the run, then you're going to be at least okay when it comes to voltage drop if you're taking that in consideration. And we'll look at this example right here. So here we know the maximum load. Okay, the maximum load we have right here is 10 amps. That's what they've calculated out. Okay, so it's 10 amps. The volts are 120. The load is 100 feet away from the source. This is an easy peasy one here. We know the length, we know the voltage, we know the load, and we assume copper because you always assume copper unless stated otherwise. Okay, so this is a formula. We're just trying to size what conductor we need. Simple, easy peasy. 2 times K times L times I divided by the actual volts dropped. This case, it's 120 volts, so 120 volts times 3%, okay, is what? So y'all know 120 times 3% is 3.6 right there, right? So that is the maximum length. Now, before we even did all this, this is important for you guys. As an electrician, at first, I don't care about voltage drop. At first, I make sure I size everything to the load. So this is 120 volts. This is 10 amps. I'm going to be doing a 15 amp branch circuit. 15 amp branch circuit requires 14 gauge copper. Now, at that point, I could have gone, well, let me do the other formula and see what the 14 gauge copper is, and I could see what the maximum length is. And if it's over 100 feet, then I'm like, I'm done. So I think you see there's many ways you can skin this. As an electrician, you guys are above the norm. In other words, these are things that you just know by looking at it. And you can use a bunch of different formulas, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Okay, so but this formula, if we want to find it, we can say, okay, well, let's plug in this stuff. 2 times 12.9 times 100 times 10 divided by 36. And this top part is 25,800. I know somebody will do the math for me to make sure I'm right. And divide this by 3.6, that is 7,166.66. So we're just going to round this to 7,167. I don't know what I said, 71,000. Sorry, 7,166. Okay, so we go to the code, and we go down here, and I have to find, let's get back to the left. I have to find a conductor that at least has that, okay? Right, so at this point, I need a circular mill that's at least 7,166. So we come back over here, and let's see here. What's that 14 at? 4,100. What's that 12 at? 6,000. What's that 10 at? Huh? So look at here. What's that 10 at? So does that not shock you? So that 12 was 6,010. So we sized this circuit to handle the load, which was a 14 gauge, 15 amps. And that's probably what you guys will do every day. It's only when you kick into the voltage drop that it changes. And here you see that in order for that to take place, right? Right here, let's see, do I have another one? Yeah, I got another one. So for that to take place, that the answer isn't. It is for code, it would be a 14 gauge. But for voltage drop, which is not a code requirement, but in order to stay below the 3%, we had to jack this thing up to a 10 gauge. Okay? Now, here's another great question that people ask me. You ready? I love these chats. I love when we get together on these mornings to talk stuff like this. Here's something that people don't understand. People say to me, okay, Paul, it's a 10 gauge that's running that 100 feet, right? Can that 10 gauge conductor go on that 15 amp overcurrent device if the lugs will allow it? Yes. So the question then becomes, well, what if they didn't? Could I then splice that 10 gauge over to the 14 and put the 14 on the 15 amp breaker? The answer to that is yes. We do it all the time, okay? You still have a conductor that's at least 14 gauge and larger, so it's going to handle the code requirement. It's the voltage drop. It's from point A to point B that you're adjusting for. Okay. And it's bigger than the 14 gauge. So it is okay. But you're splicing it back down. Can you have splices in the panel? Yes. Yes, you can. Can I take that 10 to the breaker? If the breaker will handle a 10, yes. Are you required to put any notification on that? No. Should you? I would. My practice, and this is not code, this is just Paul. My practice, anytime I did voltage drop and went to a larger conductor, if I terminated that larger conductor on to the actual 15 amp breaker because it would handle that size, then I always put a little tag on it that said increased due to VD. Now, that's not for the homeowner. That's not for anybody else. That's for me. That's for the future electrician. That's just something I did. If we were to get voltage drop in the code, I would push for some kind of notification, some kind of marking, right? Some kind of something just there so that somebody doesn't come along and think, well, shit, I'm just going to take that 15 amp breaker out and put a 30 in there and let her ride. Now, that may be okay. That may be okay if they change the whatever's on the other end because, may be okay to do that. But I put labels on there. So my preference would be if we put something in the NEC and we do mandate a voltage drop requirement in other than sensitive electronic equipment and fire pumps, if we mandate it, then put some kind of labels on it or some kind of tag or just a tag. I used to use just duct tape. I know people will say, oh, combustible material in a panel. Dude, I used to put a little bit over it just to make a little flag and we write increased due to VD. And in some cases, we might even use the sleeve of the material or whatnot and just write it on there in a Sharpie, okay? And then I know that in some occasions, in some jurisdictions back in, I can't remember what county back in Virginia, we would actually just do a label in the panel and it have warning on it. And on the label, we put it in there. We print inkjet it, we print it and put it in there. And it would say which circuits were increased if we had to do that. That's just something that we did. So I'm saying you don't have to do that, but is it okay to go from a smaller conductor that's adequately sized, splice it to a bigger conductor for voltage drop? Absolutely. And then jump back down at the other end? Absolutely. That is perfectly acceptable in the code. There's nothing that prohibits it. In fact, we do it all the time. We even have some exceptions for feeder sizing when we go from the feeders up and then we go to a trough and the lugs change and then we can go to a different size. We do that all the time, but we don't have to label it that way. Okay. So again, I'm just giving you some thoughts to think about. You do you, but that's what I do. Anyway, perfectly okay to do that. All right. So in this case, you see that this would be code-wise, 14 gauge would be compliant. Voltage drop-wise, in order to do the 3%, we would have to increase it to a 10. All right. So what's the voltage drop of a 208 volt? Single phase. Okay. So let's say we're deriving from it and we're doing 208 volt. Okay. So in this case, we got a single phase circuit that has a 208. Okay. So that has the load of 20 amperes. It's 200 feet away. Let's see here. The circuit is supplied by an 8 AWG copper stranded THW conductor and using the exact K value. Okay. Wow. All right. So I don't know that you get a question like this. But if we do have a single phase derived from a three phase, and let's just say it's a circuit that's going to be 208, okay? Just popping two legs off of this, it's going to be 208. So in this case, it's an 8 gauge. So let's use this formula. It's 208 volts, it's 200 feet. The load at the end is 20 ampere load, and we're using an 8 gauge. So let's see, what do we not know here? We know the length. We know the load, we know the volts. I believe we could calculate this using our regular method because we already know the conductor. So we could use a different method, but this one we're going to stretch our brain and we're going to use the resistance method. So we know that the 8 has the ohms per 1,000 feet is 0.778, okay, for stranded. I don't know that, so we'll go check it. So here is 8 right here, stranded, this one. So let's go over to the right. And there it is right here under uncoded. And there it is, 0.778. So that is our stranded. A little different than the solid, okay? but since it's we're typically in a raceway, we're going to be using stranded. There you go, right there. Okay, so we got that. We know that's right. And remember, we always want to get that down to feet, right? We get per foot. So we take that value, we divide that into 1,000. That tells us it's 0.000778 per foot. And we need to know what the circular mils are of that 8, right? So the circular mils of that 8, we'll go back and get the circular mils of that 8. We're back over here. Here's that 8. Here's circular mils, 16,510. So that's our circular mils. Okay, so let's go back to the lesson. All right, so that 0.000778 times 16,510, which is the circular mil, okay, of an 8, that gives me 12.84447. That's why we're okay to use what? 12.9, even though this would not round to that because it's 12.84, so it would, but we're going to use the exact K in this one. All right, so here's our formula. Okay, so we go 2 times the exact K times 200 times the 20 amp load divided by the circular mil. This is the formula. Okay. Now, interesting, this is still single phase. It was not 3-phase, so it's a single phase derived from a 3-phase. Okay. So that would be 102,758.24. And again, divide that into the circular mils. And that is 6.224 volts that are dropped, okay? That's the actual volts that are dropped. But if we take that 208 times 3%, we see that the volts dropped at 3% is 6.24. So this is 6.22, so it is just within the 3%. It is okay. So this circuit is okay. Again, that type of thing. Now, sizing wise, again, protecting the load. This is a 20 amp load, 20 amp overcurrent protected device. We didn't say whether this was a continuous load or not. We didn't get into that. It's just simply sizing to the load. That's what we were given. All right, so what is this one here? Same scenario. Now, the reason I get this one here, so this one is a little different, okay? Let's do this one. What is the maximum distance allowed for the 6 copper THW that's having a load of 64 amps? So this is a 64 amp load. Wherever we came from, this is what the amps are. We did our due diligence. We found the load. And then it says the voltage is 208. This time it's 3-phase. Okay. What's the maximum distance we can run? All right. Same as before. We know that it's a 6. We've been given a 6. That's what we've already been given. So we went to chapter 9, table 8. We found the resistance for stranded 6 copper. It's 0.491. We divide that by 1,000 to find out what it is per foot, because remember, that's given us in the tables per 1,000 feet. And then we take that value, we multiply it by 26,240. This is the circular mil of a 6 copper, or 6 in general. Okay? It would be the same if it was aluminum. 6 is a 6. As far as the stranding in the circular mil. All right, so that gives us 12.88. Okay, so again, this one would be rounded to 12.9, but we're doing exact K, so we'll use the 12.88384. All right, so finding the length, we use this formula. Circular mil times the voltage dropped. Again, it's the voltage here. Okay, and in this case, the only difference is this happens to be a 3-phase. Be very conscious of your exam question if you're given voltage drop, whether they'll tell you, they got to tell you it's single phase versus 3-phase, and all you have to do is remember to plug in the equation, okay? So, same scenario. Circular mil was 26,240, okay? That is back in chapter 9, table 8. The actual volts dropped is 6.24. We did that a minute ago when we did 208 at 3%. And then it's 1.732 times the exact K that we did up here, times 64. That is 163,737.6 at the top. That's what this equates to. And this down here equates to this value right here. Divide this into this, and it tells me that's 114.6 feet is the maximum distance. So the maximum distance that this circuit can run, right, would be 114.6 feet if the load at the end is 164 amps. Again, let's not forget that this is voltage drop. I still have to do the overcurrent protection. I still have to size the conductor initially to handle this load of 64 amps. That's the first step you always do. I keep reiterating that to you guys because that's how I teach. I'm redundant. I want to make sure that you understand that you have to size the load first, protect the load, do everything you have to do first before you start into doing any voltage drop to make sure that everything's okay. Okay? How about another example? This example, what is the voltage drop? And guys, hang in. I am going to spin the wheel. I'm a little long today, but I am going to spin the wheel, so hang with me. What is the voltage drop of 208 volts, three-phase circuit that has a load of 300 amps, and it is 400 feet away from the source? And I'm also going to do another one in a minute, guys, that has two different distances. So stay with me, please. Those that left, don't be sending me no emails asking me questions, because if you didn't hang around, you're not going to get it. Okay? All right, so 208 volts, three-phase, 300 amp load, and it says 400 feet away from the source. The circuit is being supplied with 500 kcmil THW, which probably doesn't exist. Well, nobody's going to buy THW anymore, but again, it works for the question. THW copper conductors. Okay. 208, three-phase, 400 feet, 300 amp load. We know that it's already been installed, and the engineer already spec'd out 500 kcmil for this, and it's in a steel raceway. Okay? All right. So let's kind of look at how this one worked out. So 500 kcmil per 1,000 feet. If you go to Chapter 9, Table 8, you're going to see that it's 0.029. Okay? That's what it is, right? So let's go verify that. Okay, so let me go down to 500. Here's 500 right here. And let's see here. Where are we at here? Let's see here. Copper. All right, so this says 0.029. Let's see. What did I get here? Hold on. Let's see. Source copper. Let me make sure I'm right, because we might have a number that's a little different. It means that I might have pulled this from the actual copper development rather than the NEC. But we can change it. Okay. All right. So in this one, it says that it is 0.0258. And in ours, we have 0.029. Okay. So if we rounded this, it would be 0.026. So slightly different than our calculation. All right. So let's see if it makes a difference. Let's write that down. See if that makes a difference, because I used probably the value from the actual copper document. But here it says 0.0258, and we're going to see if it makes a difference. Let's come back. Let's check a difference. Let's see if it makes a difference. All right. So here we're at this one here. So that is, and then we divide this by 1,000, and that's where we get the 0.00029. If we divided my other one, which is 0.0258, divide that by 1,000, then we're going to get, it's a little different because we're going to get overall value. Hold on. Let me do this in a, I don't like when I don't have a non-calculated computer. Hold on. Let me get the calculator out here. Let's do the other one. I can find my calculator. Okay, we got our calculator. So I'm going to do this same thing. I'm going to do 0.0258 divided by 1,000. Oops. And as y'all can see here, it is 0.0040. There you go. Okay. So that's essentially the same. So that one is the same, but 258. And that one's 0.25. Okay. So we're going to get rid of the 8 on the end. So this one is 0.00029. And the actual code would be 0.00025. 4 zeros and 25. Okay. Either way, Either way, you'll see what it works out to. All right. So in this case, it is 0.0000.2 times 5,000 is 14.4. All right. All right. So there's that value right there. Hold on. Am I locking up? Locking up? Locking up? Nope. No. Damn it. Oh, there we go. All right, sorry, it wasn't locking up on me. All right, so there's our voltage drop. Let's see what we got here. Let's see here. We've got VD, we've got all our equations, circular mill, we got 500, we got everything. We got our length. We're not doing the resistance method, so I don't know that it makes a difference here. So we got 1.732. All right, there's our 14.50. That is our actual K. As you can see, it went up a little higher. Now, that is using 0.029. Let's see if that math is off, right? So we're going to do 0.00, oops. Let's do this times 500,000 with the actual value from the NEC. And you're right. See how it's off? And I think Paul got us to see it's 12.9. So I think I did this as an example out of the actual case. So this value right here, this, if we were to do this, oh, now watch this. All right. Let's see here. Y'all see what I'm doing here? Let's make it accurate right here. Okay. So this would be, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to round it down to 2.5. And this would actually be 2.5, right? And then this would ultimately be 12.9, which is the exact same. Remember what I said about up to about 500, it doesn't make a difference? You remember that? Okay, so if we want to work this totally out, let's work this number out together. I know it's hard for y'all to see it, but let's work it out together. So it'd be let's clear it all out here. So 1.732, okay, times 12.9 times 400 times 300 equals 2 million. You know, see how this makes a difference? Let me get this out. We'll fix this. Not sure where I was at with that. Okay. So 2,681,136. Okay. And then we'll divide that. Divide that. Okay, let's see. 2,681,136 divided by 500,000 equals what? 5. Y'all check my math. Don't trust me. I'm sitting here working on the fly here. 3622. Okay, and we'll just keep it to 4. All right, that. Okay, so let's double check this. 1.732 times 12.9 times 400 times 300 equals 2,681,136 divided by 500 equals 5.36222. Okay, 3% is 6 point. Boom. We are well below the 3%. So this circuit is okay. This distance is okay. We don't have a problem with this. There you go. And let's see. Let's fix this while we're at it, since we want to be good stewards and make sure we're fixing all of Paul's graphics before we go forward. 0.00025 times 500. It's 12 it's actually it's 12.5, isn't it? All right, we're going to change this math again. It's going to only get lower. Okay, let's see here. Let me do the full math. Let's see here. Let's do it all. Okay, y'all bear with me while I want to work this thing totally out, because I want to change these numbers here. Hold on here. Let me work the total numbers here, because I want to work the whole thing out myself. So I got y'all on here. So y'all, I'm going to work it with y'all. That's why we're here at Coffee Hour. Sorry, 0.0. So we're going to say 0.0258. I want to go exact. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to do 0.0258, and I want to divide that by 1,000. Okay, so that's going to give me right here. This gives me the full amount. Let's work it out. Let's work at the very full amount. Let's be very accurate. Okay, so I'm going to take this. Let's do it all the way out. Okay, I'm going to multiply that by 50. Okay, work it all out. Okay, and that's 12.9. I want to change this. Okay, and then everything else can stay the same. Okay, so we'll save that, and we'll go right here to this view. All right, let's get back to where we were at. Let's get to where we were. Okay, all right, so back where we were. Back where we were. All right, so in this scenario, it didn't matter. We are still well below. In this run, we're well below. So when you're doing voltage drop, you're going to do these type of things. You're going to go over it. You're going to recalculate it. You're going to know the distance and do like this. I like to work with it and get it accurate. But again, it's all a recommendation. At the end of the day, we still have to size things to the load. Again, I reiterated that for I don't know how many times. Okay. Now, this is a scenario you might run into when you're doing post lighting around parking lots. This might be a situation you run into at the well scenario where you ran out to a well and they might have left you wire at the junction box top of the well and you had to run a longer distance and you're thinking, okay. Now, this one's slightly different because it says aluminum. Okay. So what size aluminum conductors are required between the junction box? So in this question, it's going to ask us for only the specific distance between the junction box. But it means I still have to calculate this. All right, so what is the distance? You might get this one in exam. So wire size aluminum conductors between the junction box and the load in the following diagram. So it's 240 volts. It's 6 conductor running 100 feet to this junction box. Now, this is a difficult one for people because they're like, where do I begin? Okay, that type of thing. And so then it goes on 100 feet to the load. 30 amps, right? So it wants to know what this conductor size is. And in your mind, you might be saying, well, dude, I just find out what the maximum length of this right here is, right? Dude, I can't help it, Adam. Did you want me to cut off and do a part 2? I mean, I'm in it. We might as well finish it, all right? I just skipped my lunch today and just do that. So we want to get this distance right here. So you might say 6 and 6, but again, we're going to figure out what it is. So the first step is I need to find the voltage drop here. Okay. So we say it's a 6. So we know the voltage, but we have to find it. So for this 6, we find the value for K. And let's see here. For the 6 aluminum, let's say it's 0.808 for 1,000 feet. So this is what it is per. Okay, for the 6, and I'm not going to trust this math because we've been there before. So I'm going to go real quick and look and see what it is for the aluminum. Okay, I won't take y'all there to bore you with it, but let's go see what the 6 is for the aluminum. You can do it too. I want to go see what the aluminum is. Okay, it is. Aluminum per 1,000 feet is 0.808. Okay, divide that by 1,000. That gives me, okay, so let's go 0.808. divided by 1,000. That's going to give me, okay, we're good there. And if you don't believe me, take your calculator and do it yourself. All right. You're going to go 0.808 divided by 1,000. And there it is right there. Casio's letting us down because it doesn't do the extended numbers. Okay. Mr. Casio does this type of thing, and I don't like that kind of thing. Okay, when I'm trying to work stuff. Okay, basically it just reminds you to go over 4 spaces, but I don't like that. So anyway, make sure you have a scientific calculator if taking an exam if you want to definitely get all those numbers out. All right, so there's that. Okay, now you could use a different formula than that because we do know the 6. You could do the other formula for this, but bear with me. So here, we're going to do solve number 1, this part. So 2 times 21.2, now that's the whole value. Here you see it worked out. Again, you could stop at 21.2, okay? I'm just working out because we said we're going to do the actual K. No real reason. It's not going to be a significant difference. So in this case, at 100 feet times 30, which is still the amps at the ends, the amps doesn't change, the load doesn't change, divided by 26,240, which was what this 6 was. This was what the circular mills of a 6 is. Okay. Do the top first. That is 127,211.52. I don't know if the math is right. Check that for me. and divide that into 26,240, that is 4.848 volts drop. So that's what the actual volts dropped to right here, to this point. So this may be where you as an electrician are running this part right here, right? But then you got a subcontractor like the plumbers or maybe the well people or whatever. They ran this part down the well and ran it back to your junction box. And you're thinking, I'm okay here, right? But did they run the right size here? If you're taking voltage drop in consideration, granted, this may be outside of your control, but again, something to think about, all right? So we know what the voltage drop here is, so make sure you write that down. So I'm gonna write that down. So we're at 4.848. Now we know the distance, we know that the maximum voltage drops 3%, right? So we know that in this 240 that the maximum voltage is 7.2, okay? So in order to calculate this out, we gotta find out what we're working with. So next step is to find out what we're working with. So the overall 3% for 240 would be 7.2. So we have 7.2. Now we're going to take away that 4.848. We got to subtract that because that's this part. That's a given. We know what we got here. So we take that 7.2 and we subtract the 4.848 away from that. That gives us a remaining value of 2.352, which is the maximum that we can have for that last run in order to make sure that overall we're not exceeding 3 feet, okay? Now, what is interesting with this is this could have been a panel, right? And this part could have been, you could have had a 5% overall, so you could have calculated this at like 2%. And this part at 3%, so that the overall is not more than 5%. Okay, that's how that works. But this is a branch circuit, so we're looking at overall 3. Okay, it's just that simple. You break it up as you need it. So in this case right here, if we're looking at the 3%. So let's say, okay, so how do we calculate that out? Because this is all we need right here. And we don't know the conductor size yet. All right, so we have to find the conductor. So we're choosing this formula. What is this circular mill? So we're going 2 times K times L times I, and we're going to use the voltage, the actual voltage this time. Instead of the value for 3%, we're going to use the value that we have remaining because that's the only volts we have left that we can drop and still stay within the 3%. This is a crucial step that many people miss. So if you're doing multiple legs, this is how you do it. All right, so we know that it was 21.2. We're just going to stick with that and keep it simple, stupid. 2 times 21.2 times 100 times 30. The load didn't change. And remember, our volts dropped. Remaining was 2.352. So that's the volt value we put right here. That means we have 127,200 divided into the actual volts that are dropped, okay, which is 2.352. That equals 54,081.63 circular mils. This conductor, in order to maintain the 3%, given that this one dropped us down to a certain value, right? We need to make sure that we size this conductor. So this was a 6 over here. So what size should this be? All right, well, we got to find the conductor under Chapter 9, Table 8, that is at least 54,081.63 circular mils. So we're going to go to the NEC. We're over here, and we're still at Chapter 9, Table 8, and we're going down this circular mil table right here, and we're going to find me one that's at least 54,081. All right, well, the 4 is that. Let's look at this 3. This 3 is 52. Not going to work. This 2 gauge is 66. 66 is the next largest size over the 52. We had to have at least 54, so it looks like it's going to be a 2 gauge. So in order to maintain our voltage drop, based on what we've been given, we need to increase this size. That means that this is going to have to be a 2 gauge aluminum. So we have a 6 here, which kind of choked it down. But in order to maintain it again over here, we're increasing it up to a 2 gauge, that type of thing. Okay. Now, you might have gone the other way. You might run 2 over here, and then you've got a lower voltage drop here, and then it will reduce, it will be a smaller size over here, kind of that going down effect. Okay, that type of scenario. Okay. Probably going to have to do that in the real world. Why? Because if this example we just did was, let's say, the plumbers, pump people, they're not going to run a 2. Promise you that. They're not going to run a 2. So they're probably going to run the 6 if they run the 6, right? So you're going to be the one that's got to say, well, crap, I'm going to have to compensate. So you're probably going to have to run the larger conductor on the front end to compensate what they did on the back end. You know it. You know it. I know it. Electricians we just get stuck with it, right? But however you skin it, you just got to remember that's how you do the different pieces. Okay, so I don't know if you knew that one or not, but that's exactly how you do the different pieces. Okay, let's do some giveaways. I've been running out of time. I've kept y'all for longer than I wanted. Again, this is a coffee hour that has gone totally off the rails. And I've lost my entire lunch today, but that's okay, folks. Let's do this. Let's spin the wheel. Hashtag win. Let's get in on it. I blew my lunch. Well, no, I still work every day, right? Let's see what you win. Let's get in on the spin. You told me what your name was in an email. I'm sorry. I'm so bad with names, I forgot. I apologize. Estimating course. That is an amazing course we'll be giving away. It's an over $500. Can you splice 6 to 2? Absolutely you can. Why can't you? Absolutely. Who told you couldn't? As long as the binding device that you have is adequate to handle the 2 sizes, no problem at all doing it. In fact, a lot of voltage drop, you're going to have to go from a smaller conductor, like I said earlier, a smaller conductor, splice it to a larger conductor, run the distance, and you might have to splice back down to the smaller. Remember, as long as you protect the circuit at its ampacity, just because you go to a bigger conductor doesn't change anything. It still has the capacity because it's larger than the smaller one. So again, done all the time, every day of the week, that type of thing, okay? And use copper lunch is for suckers. That's right. Always use copper. Copper to save you better than running that aluminum anyway, but man, all flavors different. All right, got you in on that melting toast again. Thank you. Let's spin the wheel again. Let's get somebody else in the win. Giveaways, trying to rapidly give some giveaways here again. I appreciate all you coming. Yeah, I know, Nepo. Time just flies when you're having fun. A lot of info. Val, let's get Val. All right, Val. All right, Val, let's see what you get. Also, got to shout out to my folks watching behind the scenes over on TikTok. Glad to have you behind the scenes. All they do is stare at me for an hour and a half. This is like double coffee hour. It's like, this is like. Wow. All right. Well, Val, you're also in that estimating course. What is going on with this thing? All right, course. That's a great value, over $500 value. You'll be in the drawing. There's the drawing date, around about that date. So let's do another one. Let's go. Giving away more stuff. Let's go. I'm in coffee 2 hour today. But I got to finish here in a few minutes. I got 15 minutes before I'm going to lose my whole life. All right, David Scott. David, let's see what you get, my friend. Let's see what you can get in a drawing for or win instantly. Let's go. The numbers are adding up, folks. We have a lot of people on these drawings. I don't know if you can't see it. The glare is too bad. Studio lights. But drawing here. I got names I'm gonna have to transfer. All kinds of names. All right, David, you're in on the grounding and bonding course drawing. That's our 2023 grounding and bonding course. You're in the drawing for that. Okay, that's almost, I think it's $300 value for that course. It doesn't expire, so it's a great value. So let's do another one. Let's go. Rapid giveaways today. Let's go. #win. Get in on the spin. We've given away no Fast Tracks tubes today. What's up with that? All right, Tino H, let's see what you get on the spin. One vote for double coffee hour. That's like a coffee hour with an espresso shot. That's what we'll call it. Now, I want to be good stewards of your guys. All right, you're in the enhanced. All right, you're in the enhanced drawing for the 2023 enhanced course. If you already have that, you can pick any other course that we have when we do the drawing if you happen to win. Okay, so let's see here. What's Grace say? Grace is my husband and I are electrical contractors with 5 boys. Also, that is awesome. Our 2 oldest are in the trade. That, you know what? That deserves a whoop whoop. Hold on, I don't have whoop whoop, but oh, that's the wrong button, by the way.
I could have hit that button and that was the wrong button too.
Hold on. There we go. In the trade, whatever. I didn't finish reading it. Our eldest son has a wireman certificate, and our second son is first-year apprentice. That is some awesome stuff right there. Keeping it in the family, that is awesome. Having females in the trade too is wonderful. It's amazing. I just think that this is such an amazing trade. You know what? A lot of the women that I know that are in the trade are amazing. I had this one lady contractor who used unique colors for all of her wires, all of her feeders. Everything was unique, pinks and purples. She labeled everything. She put her name on everything. She basically made it artwork. She put her label, and everybody used to say at my seminars, they used to say, "Are you trying to make it easy for the lawyers to find you?" Right? And at the end of the day, her response to all them was, "Yeah, but you know who I am, and you're talking about me, and so does your customer." And she was just amazing. She took it and she ran with it, and she had labels on everything, and she had colorful labels. I mean, she just took it to the max, but her work was impeccable, that type of thing. And again, she had that flavor, that type of thing that was just there. I dream of starting a program with young men, 16, 18, equip them for skills. We need it. We need it. You're most welcome. We are most welcome. All right, let's see. 5 electricians. Yeah, I know, Tito. Electricians in the trades, buddy. There you go. All right, let's do another giveaway real quick. Did I give you Tino? Okay, you're in the drawing, Tino, for the enhanced course. All right, let's go. Oh, wrong button. Wrong button. All right, I gotta roll today. It's been too long. I'm sorry for those that hung in there. Y'all are troopers. All right, Alex, let's see what you can win, my friend. For the conductor card. That is an awesome card because it also does give you all the temperature adjustments automatically. So it's going to make voltage drop easy because all that value is on there. How about that? And so you're in the drawing to get one of those. Okay. All right. All right, folks, let me take it back to me. Hey, I appreciate all of you coming today. I'm sorry I went longer than normal today. Coffee hour turned into the espresso shot, 2 hours almost. I will skip my lunch today because of you. And I would do it every day of the week for you folks. All right. All right, folks. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. And we'll catch you on tomorrow's coffee hour where we're going to go back to examining some code questions. And then we'll have a lesson at the end of the week. I don't want to announce it yet, but tomorrow we're going to go over code questions. So make sure you bring your code book in your calculators, and we're going to do some calculations as well as do some code lookups. And we may even test the hog a little bit. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. I appreciate all of you. Get your week started safely. If you have safety meetings in the morning, pay attention, okay? Because I want to see you around tomorrow, and so does your family. Take care. God bless.